Now imagine giving birth and then walking back into a prison cell with your newborn baby. Most people don't know that this is even a thing that exists, a place inside of a maximum security prison where women raise their babies behind bars. I was not pregnant, but I lived in that dorm. And what I saw changed the way that I think about motherhood, punishment, and second chances. My name is Tracy, and I am a therapist and an individual in long-term recovery. And back when I was in my active addiction, I ended up doing some prison time. I did time at Indiana Women's Prison, a maximum security prison, and it was there that I was assigned to the baby dorm, not as a mother, but as one of the few filler inmates that reside in the dorm. So I have the inside scoop on what really happens inside this program. You think you've seen it all in prison until you hear lullabies and babies crying echoing through a cell block. If you guys watched one of my other prison videos on intake, then you know that in Indiana, you go through a couple different intake processes. First, you go through the main intake, which is like 4 to 6 weeks in this other prison. They decide which prison you're going to go to, your final resting place, if you will. And for me, that was maximum security IWP, Indiana Women's Prison. Anyone who has a pending charge in Indiana automatically goes to maximum security. Now, once you get to that prison, you go through another intake, which is another couple weeks in a special intake dorm where the workers kind of get to know you, they interview you, and they try and identify where you're going to fit best within the prison. You know, they kind of decide where to put you based on your demeanor and things like that. And I guess they decided that for me, the most appropriate place was the baby dorm, which is slightly insulting. I'm not going to lie, slightly insulting. But I didn't know this. So at this point, we're looking at like 8 weeks now in a maximum security prison, my first time, and then I'm sent to my final dorm where I'll do the rest of my time. I have no idea what to expect. I'm a little nervous. I have no idea what kind of fresh hell is going to await me behind these doors. So I gather up my stuff and I walk down the sidewalk. There's dorm buildings all around the campus. I press the buzzer and the door opens. And as I walk into the day room. And the first thing I notice is the rainbows painted on the walls. And the butterflies. And then I hear babies. I hear babies crying down the hallway. And I genuinely did not even know that this program existed. So I was honestly like, are they fucking with me right now? Is this a joke? I was so confused. So confused. So here I am, standing in my new day room in a maximum security prison, taken in the scene of where I'm going to be living for the next few months. What I was expecting was chaos, maybe sadness, maybe some shanks. But instead, it looked like I had just walked into a daycare. It was the middle of a daycare behind bars. It was warm and nurturing in the middle of razor wire and lockdown cells. It didn't fit. It did not fit there at all. It was the only dorm in the entire prison where laughter did not seem forbidden. However, curse words were. Definitely the only dorm in the prison where curse words were forbidden. If one of the COs caught you cursing, they would literally get on you. Baby, I couldn't curse in prison. Now, keep in mind, for those of you thinking, oh, I got it the soft way, I didn't get the full prison experience, just a side note, okay? I still spent 2 to 3 weeks in intake at IWP, 4 weeks at intake at Rockville, which is also a maximum security prison, and I worked out in the real prison every single day. So I did not spend my whole prison time in this baby dorm. But the dorm is not big enough to fill with only regular people, so they will put other offenders to live in there also, offenders who have nonviolent crimes and non-child related crimes. I was there for a burglary, and apparently I seemed pretty chill, so I guess they decided the baby dorm was the place for me. So this day room, like I said, filled with rainbows and sunshine on the walls. There are high chairs, the swingy, rocky baby seats everywhere. There is women sitting and holding their babies, feeding them bottles. And then there's the desk with the CO watching over everything. Down one hallway, there's normal prison cells, 2 bunks per cell. Down the other hallway, there are actual bedrooms with actual beds, cribs, and armchairs in them. But at the end of the day, you look up and you still see those cameras. It looked a little bit like hope, but you could definitely still feel the fear. So I got to know a little bit about the baby program and what it is. Apparently, if you are pregnant when you get sent to prison in Indiana and you meet certain requirements, i.e., having a nonviolent charge, having a sentence that is under a certain length, and things like that, then they will actually send you to IWP and allow you to keep your baby with you after you give birth. You can keep your baby with you in that dorm for up to 2 years. Obviously, there are a lot of rules, a lot of requirements, a lot of restrictions, a lot of the COs telling you how to be a parent, which I would imagine can be very frustrating. As long as you follow those rules, you and your baby get to live there and have a real bedroom and be together in prison for up to 2 years after you give birth. And by 2 years, that's a walking, talking kid. I mean, there were walking, talking toddlers in there too. They actually had a playground behind a razor wire fence, of course, right outside of our dorm. I was not ever allowed out on the playground, but the kids were. The moms got to take their kids out to the playground. I, however, was in a regular dorm cell down the other hallway, the non-special people hallway. All the moms there definitely have to take a lot of classes. And like I said, the COs are on everybody. I mean, they were on me and the other people. They're especially on the moms. I mean, there's no cursing. You make sure you hold your baby right. You don't co-sleep. You do all of those things. And even the regular people in there had expectations. Any nonsense, cursing, fighting, drugs were not tolerated whatsoever. While I was there, there was one girl who snuck in Suboxone strips in the mail. They immediately caught her and took her to isolation, and I never saw her again. Never saw her again. They did not play in that dorm. They were not taking the chance of a baby getting a hold of something. Mm-mm. Because while we were just normies in that cell, we still got to interact with the baby. A lot of the girls in there actually had the job of a nanny. A nanny is another inmate who has been cleared to watch your baby while you shower or sleep or whatever you need to do. I applied for the nanny job. I did not get it, but there were a few nannies in there. Even if you weren't a nanny, you can still like hold the babies and help them with the babies for a minute, but like you can't be changing diapers or anything like that. Bummer, right? But the nannies, they did. They changed the diapers and did all that. And it was actually really chill. It really was. I met some other really nice girls in there. We had like a group of friends. We got to sit around and play with babies. Typically, when you're locked up, you're very bored, right? You just can't be bored and super depressed when you're holding a happy little baby. I mean, you just can't be. There's freaking rainbows on the wall. How depressed can you be? You know what I mean? Now, I still had a typical day. I would get up at 4:30 every morning and go to work in the kitchen, and then I would come back and I would spend the rest of the day at the dorm. And it was really nice for me to be able to have that sort of encouragement while I was there. I didn't have kids at this time, and it made me kind of want to have kids later on. And for the girls who did get to keep their children, I can't imagine what a difference that made for them. Giving birth and going back to prison without your baby sounds like the most horrendous experience in the whole entire world. So giving moms this chance to actually keep their baby with them is incredible. And I believe based on the studies that I've seen, the recidivism rates for this particular program are very, very low, meaning most of the people that complete this program succeed. I mean, just sitting there and like holding this precious, innocent baby while you are serving time for your mistakes and bad things that you've done, it hits different. It just does. There was one thing that was really hard for the mothers in there. I saw it many times. So there were normies in there were moms and babies in there, and there were people who were pregnant in there. Every time when they were pregnant, they would go to the hospital, and the next day or the day after, they would always come back to the dorm without their baby. The baby always had to stay at the hospital for an extra day. And then the CO would actually bring the baby back to the dorm a day or so later. I guess they want to make sure everything is healthy. They want to make sure everything is good before they know that it can stay there. If a baby is born with health issues, it cannot stay at the dorm. So there were actually mothers who went and had their baby, fully intended to bring their baby back to the dorm with them, and were not allowed to. They had to spur of the moment find a family member to take in the baby because it had a medical issue of some kind. And that was very, very sad. I mean, they still get visitation if their family allows them to, but that's obviously not the same. And then eventually they have to leave the baby dorm. So their whole life is changed up. And coming back without their babies was very tough. You could definitely tell when they came back in, they had this sense of depression about them, but I will say most of them handled it very well. They knew that their babies were coming the next day, and most of them were really hanging on to that hope, and they handled that 24-hour period without their baby very, very well. That would have been hard for me, I know. So I remember multiple times that CO came walking into the door with a car seat and a new baby joined our dorm. And it was an incredible moment. The mom was so happy to get their baby. And it was a beautiful, beautiful thing to watch. It really was. So for some women, it absolutely gave them a reason to live, a reason to keep trying. Although for those ones that got kicked out of the dorm or their baby had to stay with someone else due to medical conditions, it broke them all over again. But those babies were not the norm. Hope can definitely be a double-edged sword when freedom isn't part of the deal. Those babies and those women were the minority. I remember watching a woman go home with her 2-year-old after serving a few years there at IWP. As her days were approaching for her to go home and she was packing and getting ready, you could just feel the hope and the positivity just radiating off of her. She was so excited, she was so ready. And to have her son with her throughout that whole process, it was just amazing. And now her son is able to go live outside in the real world and really experience life. And that is such a beautiful thing for them. That was the most amazing thing to watch. And I really hope that she is still clean and doing well today. You know, the saddest part of that dorm was not the crying babies. It was the silence after they were gone. The minimal sad parts of this, negative parts of this, are so incredibly worth it. Programs like this that reduce recidivism so significantly, that increase the bond between a mom and a child, that actually support recovery and mental health, you don't see that in prison every day. You do not. So yes, there are cons and there are hardships with this program. And yes, it is difficult to see babies behind bars. It is difficult to see 2-year-olds who can't go to the park or go see Santa at Christmas time. And that's a controversial part of this program that a lot of people try to argue. But actually, research says that children don't start to remember their childhood until about 5 years old. And it also says that having a safe environment to live and grow up in and a close bond with a healthy mother sets them up for success. And let's consider the alternative. Mom has baby and comes back to prison alone. Mom is likely devastated and has a hard time staying clean and out of the system because her child is now gone, because you have, what, 1 or 2 years to regain custody after you lose it, and if you don't, then they're gone forever. Baby has no bond with mother and is now in the foster care system. Or maybe he's at home with a dad or a family member who's in active addiction and has no idea how to be a parent. At IWP, the babies are safe, they are cared for, they are loved, and that is a beautiful thing. Now, this storm holds probably, I don't know, 7 to 10-ish pregnant mamas in Indiana, but 1 out of 4 incarcerated women in the U.S. are pregnant. That is a hell of a lot of babies, mamas, and families who don't have access to this amazing resource. So I really hope that that changes in the future, and I will forever be advocating for more programs like this that actually reduce recidivism and actually help families instead of tear them down. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate all of your support so much, and I will see you next week in our next one. Bye.